So, our last section for this module is regarding a particular argument in favor of moral relativism. This is J.L. Mackie's argument from Queerness. And this doesn't mean queer as in the LGBTQ plus community, QA plus community, but rather queer in the older sense of the word in English, meaning odd, right? This is in fact a non-cognitivist version of the argument for moral relativism, right? Mackie believes that cognitivism lies on a false assumption that moral statements make true or false claims. He believes that they aim to do so, but ultimately always land on some falsity based off of the fact that there is no ability, that moral claims have no ability to talk to the world itself, right? To talk about the way the world is. They can only talk about our values, right? So Mackie argues for relativism, and he does so with an argument that has sort of two prongs, right? Sort of a pincer attack. And here we see one of those examples of ethics overlapping with the two other fields of philosophy, or two of the other main branches of philosophy, metaphysics, which is the first arm, and epistemology, which is the second arm, right? And the argument's actually fairly straightforward, even if Mackie presents it in very complicated language in his book. So it goes like this, right? The metaphysical arm starts by a simple assertion. Facts are simply true, right? They just are. Part of being the fact is that it's true, regardless of whether you believe that the Earth is a spheroid or elliptoid or not. It is, right? Regardless of whether you believe the sun is at the center of the solar system, it is. Regardless of whether or not you believe that Krampus is real and will come and devour your children if you're your children if they're naughty, he is. That last one may be false, but we can hope, right? And since facts are real, right? They just simply are, right? But there are so many people who don't believe in certain facts, right? You can believe against the evidence. You can disbelieve facts, right? You can believe in things that are patently false. Because facts do not have a component that compels you to believe them. The truth is the truth regardless of whether or not you believe in it. But that also reveals that you have no compulsion to actually believe in true things. Right? Now, take this and compare it to morals, right? Your sense of right and wrong. Your sense of right and wrong is built foundationally upon a compulsion to act on those values, right? Those morals. When you think that something is wrong, you feel compelled to act on that thought, right? To correct the wrongness. When you think that something is the right thing to do, you feel compelled to act so as to see it done. That's what's there for morality, is compulsion, right? A feeling that compels you towards action. Now, let's take this idea that, and this is internal to the value itself, right? If you have this value, you feel compelled to act on it. Now let's take this idea of morality, which has as its base this internal compulsion to act on the value it expresses, and then the idea of a fact, right? So morality and a fact, right? So the facts just are true, regardless of whether we believe in them or not. Morality we feel a compulsion to act on it, whether once we believe in it, right? If we believe in it. So the idea of a moral fact metaphysically would have to involve the combination of these two things, right? They'd have to intersect and overlap. So we'd have to have something that was true regardless of whether or not we believed it, but also that we felt compelled to act upon, right? The moment that we thought of something like killing is wrong, we would feel compelled to act on that in some way, shape, or form, if moral facts were real. That's Mackie's metaphysical argument, right? And as he points out, this is quite different from any other sort of fact that we know about, right? That the compulsion to act on it would work against the notion that we could disbelieve it. So since there is a plurality of moral values, that there are people who think, yeah, no, killing's just fine, whatever, yeah, that's Tuesday brunch activity, versus those who think, oh God, I could never kill a living thing as long as I lived, right? Except myself. But really, that's time that's doing that. Yay, entropy. Right? We can have these wildly disparate values and all shades of gray in between. That seems to suggest, according to Mackie, that a moral fact is something that's just metaphysically queer to consider, right? Metaphysically odd. And by being metaphysically odd, it becomes a logical sort of impossibility, right? There is nothing that we experience in this way. Then he goes on to his epistemological arm, where he says, okay, acknowledging that the possibility, though he doubts it very strongly that they exist, just acknowledging the possibility that a moral fact could exist, right? There would still be a further problem, right? So assume for the moment that moral facts aren't a controversial thing, that they do exist. Well, given their uniqueness, Mackie believes that humans would need a special mental faculty to know them, right? Since they're quite unlike any other sort of fact that we know of, right? That we experience. By design, we would need some sort of mental faculty, whether you want to think of that as a region of the brain or just a general power of the mind, right? Whatever sort of vision of the mind you subscribe to, right? We would need a separate faculty that processed and held moral facts versus any other kind. And this, he thinks, poses a further problem, right? Right? So say that we do have this faculty, how then do we still account for the variety of morals that humans possess, right? Including ones that seem contradictory. Right? Different cultures and different people, different individuals even, will wind up having different values. Right? If we have this faculty that knows moral facts, then shouldn't we all be on the same page as far as morality goes? We should, right? Unless we want to claim that either there are developmental hindrances towards this mental faculty, or that certain races and cultures just have an underdeveloped version of it, right? Which itself is problematic because then you get into racism, basically, right? It becomes a quick slope down towards racism in that form of argument, or just national exceptionalism, right? Racial exceptionalism or national exceptionalism. Americans have better moral values than anywhere else in the world, right? That kind of thinking. And that's equally problematic because the reason behind that claim, right, winds up being because we're just better than you, right? And that is can lead to a lot of morally problematic situations itself, right? Now, beyond just being problematic, especially if this mental faculty is meant to be shared across all humans, um, it does pose additional risks and questions, such as why do we have this mental faculty, right? What would have been the impetus for us to develop it, or for us to have been given it, if you want to go with a creationist story, right? Um, there's seems to be no value in it other than to make value judgments, right? And if we can't have consensus through this faculty, it seems just more likely to say, according to Mackie, that we develop different values, different cultures develop different values based off of their environments, right? And that's why, like Syrians in their more harsh environment, tribalistic, harsher environment, would have had to have resorted towards sort of a more authoritarian model, right? Where punishment was the way of, in harsh punishment was the way of deterring societal breakdown, right? And ensuring cohesion, because that helps them survive. It keeps them tight knit and together, right? You can't afford too many mistakes in such environments. So, as a result, you have punishments that minimize the repetition of the mistakes out of fear and intimidation, versus societies that have, you know, developed themselves so that they can lend more towards cosmopolitan ideals, right? Notions of equality and whatnot, because they have to live with all these creature comforts. They don't have to face that sort of breakdown and environmental harshness. Um, that's what Mackie thinks is a more sensible explanation. But all of this does leave us with one particular problem. If morality is relative, right, how do we make any sort of judgments whatsoever, right? Um, and this is the very thing that moral theories fight back against, right? Normative theories fight back against. They try to establish some way of how we should uh, make moral judgments, right? Even if everything is ultimately relative, we can still talk about how we ought to make moral judgments, right? We can still talk about a general normative framework, or various frameworks, by which to go about doing ethics. And that's important, right? So that's what we'll spend the next couple of modules talking about, until we get to module 9.